All right, welcome to our third study on the person of Peter. This week we're going to be in Mark chapter 8, verses 27 through 38. We're coming into a beautiful time of year, spring. Everything is waking up and moving. There's change in the air. When spring comes, we just have filled with this hope and this joy of life being abundant and full around us. The leaves are popping up out of the ground. And today we're going to look at a story of change. So Jesus is walking with the disciples and he asks them, "Who do people say that I am?" And he gets a pretty common response. The disciples say, well, some say that you're a prophet. Some say that maybe you're John the Baptist come back. Maybe you're just a really wise guy. And that's something that we might hear today. A lot of people who don't know Jesus would say that he's just a prophet, that he was a wise man. He had some really great teachings and maybe you should follow him, but that's about it. That's as far as they go. So Jesus pushes him a little farther and says, "What do you say that I am?" And Peter, bold Peter, jumps up and says, "Well, you're the Christ." And as Christians, as we're reading this, we kind of are like, oh man, this is great. Like Peter's figuring it out. He's getting it. But Jesus' response is weird. He tells them not to tell anyone. He tells them, strictly, don't tell anyone about that. Now, if you know anything about the Bible, in the Old Testament, the Christ that the Jews were looking forward to looked very different from the Jesus that we know and that we love. It was they thought it was going to be someone who was going to come with a war and riding on a chariot, riding on a beautiful big horse and come through and wipe out the enemies and destroy everyone and turn Israel back into the great grand nation that it was in the past. They were looking for someone to conquer and destroy their enemies. Now, Jesus did that, didn't he? He destroyed the true enemy of sin that lives within us. But he didn't do it in the way that they were thinking. So Peter, we want to root for him because we think he's got it right. But Jesus is like, oh, don't tell anyone that. Don't tell anyone that. My wife Katrina's favorite time of the year is when she gets to go buy flowers and plant them in the ground. She absolutely just loves the beauty of it, the peace of it, of nurturing something and bringing it into the fullness of its life. And it's exciting too. My daughter Mika is so excited to see all the flowers and the colors, and she names the colors and likes to walk around with her mom and discover all of the things that are growing and becoming new. And it has changed her perspective of the ground. In the winter, it was just ground and we walked everywhere. But now we can't walk in certain spots because there's flowers coming up. And she's actually aware of that. Mika will tell me, "Stop, Dad, don't go there." When I'm like working in the flower bed, I'm like, "Oh, it's okay right now. Dad's digging a hole." Her perspective has changed on just the ground. And that's what we see here. Peter is getting his perspective changed. It says in verse 31 that he began to teach them that the Son of Man, which is this beautiful image that comes from the book of Daniel, saying that he must suffer, he'll be rejected by the elders and the priests, he's going to be put to death. And Peter doesn't like the sound of this. He's like, no, don't you know the Christ is supposed to come and like destroy everyone else and be this awesome warrior and take up the sword and just go for it? Come on, Jesus, what are you talking about? So Peter, bold Peter, rebukes Jesus, says, "Hey now, Jesus, you're doing this wrong. You got this whole Christ thing wrong." And Jesus responds dramatically, turning and rebukes Peter and says, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." Could you imagine being Peter and hearing those words, "Get behind me, Satan"? Peter had to have been like just broken-hearted. Maybe he turned to his other disciples and be like, "Hey guys, no, I don't think Jesus meant it. No, he was just doing his exaggeration metaphor thing again. That's what he was doing right there." But no, Jesus tells him, "Get behind me, Satan," because this is the exact same temptation that Jesus faced from Satan himself in the desert. "I'll give you the whole world, Jesus, if you just stop and worship me." And Peter, he has that image in mind that Jesus is going to conquer the whole world and reign there. But that's the temptation of the devil, not the things of God. Put your feet in Peter's shoes. What would it feel like to have your idea of Jesus be incorrect? Have you read through the Gospels enough to know who Jesus is? Do you have a clear picture of the way that he wants us to live, the way that he lived his life as the example for us? Or do you have an image of Jesus in your mind and in your heart that comes from the mouths of others? Have you created this image of Jesus that isn't from the Bible? If you have, that's dangerous. Spend some time in your Bible this week reading through the Gospel of Mark. So you start with chapter 8. Go ahead and read chapter 8. Set no time limit for yourself. And think about who Jesus was. How does he talk? How does he engage with people? How does he show his character through this story? We're going to talk about this on Wednesday. So come prepared. Read through some of the Gospels. You don't have to stop at Mark, but read them like a story. Don't just read a couple verses and say, all right, I have to get everything I need out of these verses. Read the story. Let the person of Jesus speak to you through the text. And we'll talk about what you guys have read and specifically this story together. I'm excited to see you there.